I keep seeing this pattern in older adults. Someone comes in, usually in their late 60s or early 70s, and they mention feeling a little foggy after lunch. Not dizzy, not sick, just slower, like their brain needs a minute to catch up. And when I ask what they ate, it's almost always the same kind of meal, a sandwich with a glass of juice, or pasta with a sweet dessert right after. Sometimes it's cereal with a banana and a muffin on the side. All perfectly normal foods, nothing spoiled, nothing exotic, but the combination does something, and it's not always obvious at first. They'll say it's been happening for a few months, maybe longer. They thought it was just age, or maybe they didn't sleep well the night before, or stress, and those things can contribute, sure. But when you start asking about the timing, when the fog shows up, how long it lasts, what they ate right before, you start to see a pattern, and the pattern is almost always the same. It's a combination of refined carbohydrates and simple sugars eaten together, often without much else to slow things down. And the brain doesn't handle that the same way it used to. Now, I want to be clear, this isn't about demonizing bread or fruit or pasta. It's not about cutting out entire food groups or following some rigid diet plan. It's about understanding what happens in the body when certain foods meet each other in the stomach at the same time, and how that can create a kind of metabolic traffic jam that the aging brain finds harder to navigate. Let me explain what I mean by that. When you eat something that's mostly starch, white bread, white rice, a plain bagel, it breaks down quickly into glucose. That's sugar in the blood. And when you add something sweet on top of that, juice, a cookie, honey, even a piece of fruit that's very ripe, you're stacking two fast sources of glucose on top of each other. They hit the bloodstream almost at the same time, and your body has to respond. The pancreas releases insulin. That's the hormone that helps move glucose out of the blood and into the cells where it can be used for energy. But here's the thing. In older adults, that insulin response isn't always as smooth as it used to be. It might be a little delayed, or a little too strong, or the cells themselves might not respond as quickly. So what happens is this. The glucose spikes fast. The insulin comes in to bring it down, and then, sometimes, it overshoots. The blood sugar drops lower than it should. Not dangerously low, usually, but low enough that the brain notices. And the brain is very sensitive to glucose. It uses more glucose than almost any other organ. It doesn't store much of it. So when the supply dips, even a little, the brain slows down. Thinking feels harder. Words take longer to find. You might feel a little disconnected, like you're watching yourself from a step behind. And that's the fog. Now, this doesn't happen to everyone, and it doesn't happen every time. Some people can eat a bagel with jam and feel fine. Others can't. And that variability makes it harder to recognize. You might eat the same breakfast 3 days in a row and feel foggy on day 2, but not on day 1 or 3. So you think, well, it can't be the food, but it might be. Because the body's response isn't perfectly consistent. It depends on how you slept, how much you moved the day before, what you ate the night before, how hydrated you are, even how stressed you feel that morning. All of those things affect how your body handles glucose. And that's where the confusion comes in. Because the fog isn't always tied to a dramatic event. It's subtle. It's quiet, and it mimics other things. Fatigue, distraction, early memory changes. So people don't always connect it to food. They just think they're getting older, and maybe they are. But that doesn't mean the fog is inevitable. So let me walk through what's actually happening in the body, not to scare you, but to help you see the mechanics. Because once you understand the mechanics, you can make small adjustments that often help. When you eat that sandwich with juice, the starch in the bread starts breaking down in your mouth. The enzymes in your saliva begin the process. By the time it reaches your stomach, it's already partly converted to sugar. The juice, if it's orange juice or apple juice, is mostly fructose and glucose. It doesn't need much digestion. It moves through the stomach lining quickly. So within about 15 to 30 minutes, you have a surge of glucose entering the bloodstream. And that surge is sharp. It's not a gentle rise. It's more like a spike. Your pancreas senses that spike and releases insulin, but in many older adults, the insulin response is blunted. It doesn't come as fast, or it comes, but the cells don't respond as well. That's called insulin resistance, and it increases with age, even in people who don't have diabetes, so the glucose stays elevated longer than it should, and that prolonged elevation can make you feel sluggish, heavy, like your body is working harder than it should be. But then, after maybe an hour or 90 minutes, the insulin finally catches up. And sometimes it overcompensates. The blood sugar drops, not into hypoglycemia usually, but into a range that's lower than your brain is comfortable with. And that's when the fog sets in. You feel slower, less sharp, maybe a little irritable or anxious without knowing why. And it can last for an hour or two before your body stabilizes again. Now, if you had eaten that same sandwich with some protein, maybe turkey or chicken or even a hard-boiled egg, and some fat, maybe avocado or a handful of nuts, the whole process would have been different. The protein and fat slow down the digestion of the carbohydrates. They create a kind of buffer. The glucose enters the bloodstream more gradually. The insulin response is steadier, and the brain gets a more consistent supply of fuel. No spike, no crash, just a gentle, even flow, and that's the key. It's not about avoiding carbohydrates. It's about not eating them in isolation. It's about pairing them with something that slows the process down. But here's where it gets tricky, because a lot of the foods we think of as balanced aren't really balanced in that way. A bowl of oatmeal with a banana and a drizzle of honey sounds healthy. And it is in some ways. But if there's no protein and no fat, it's still mostly carbohydrates and sugar. The oatmeal is better than a donut, sure, it has fiber. But the fiber in oats doesn't slow digestion as much as people think, especially if the oats are instant or very finely milled. So you still get a fairly quick rise in blood sugar. Add the banana, which is high in natural sugar, and the honey, which is pure sugar, and you're back to that same pattern: spike, insulin, crash, fog. And this happens more often than you'd think, because we've been told for decades that certain foods are healthy: whole grain bread, fruit, juice, and they are, in the right context. But context matters, and the context that matters most is what else is on the plate. Let me give you an example. I had a patient a few years ago, a woman in her early 70s, sharp, active, still working part-time. She came in because she was worried about her memory. She said she'd been feeling foggy in the afternoons, and it was starting to affect her work. She'd forget what she was about to say in meetings. She'd lose her train of thought halfway through a sentence. And she was scared. She thought it might be early dementia, so we did some cognitive testing. Normal, we did some blood work. Normal. No signs of anything neurological. And then I asked her to walk me through a typical day of eating. Breakfast was a smoothie. Banana, berries, apple juice, a little yogurt. Lunch was a salad with grilled chicken, but she'd have a bread roll on the side and a glass of lemonade. Snack in the afternoon was usually crackers with hummus and maybe a piece of fruit. Dinner was balanced: protein, vegetables, a starch. And I asked her, "When do you feel the foggiest?" She said after lunch. Every day, like clockwork. Around 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon, and it would last until about 4. So we made one change. We kept the salad and the chicken. We swapped the lemonade for water with a slice of lemon, and we added a small handful of almonds to the meal. That's it. No other changes. And within a week, the afternoon fog was gone. Completely gone. She called me, almost laughing, and said she couldn't believe it was that simple. And I told her it's not always that simple, but sometimes it is. Now, I don't want to suggest that every case of brain fog in older adults is caused by food. It's not. There are a lot of other factors: poor sleep, dehydration, medications, chronic inflammation, low vitamin B12, thyroid issues, depression, anxiety. All of those things can cause fog, and they need to be ruled out. But food is one of the easiest things to adjust. And for a lot of people, it makes a noticeable difference. So let's talk about why this happens more as we age. Because it's not just about insulin resistance. That's part of it. But there's more. The brain changes as we get older. The blood vessels in the brain become a little stiffer. Blood flow decreases slightly. The brain's ability to pull glucose out of the bloodstream becomes less efficient. And the brain's backup fuel system, ketones, which come from fat, doesn't kick in as easily unless you're specifically eating in a way that supports it. So the brain becomes more dependent on a steady, reliable supply of glucose. And when that supply fluctuates, the brain struggles more than it used to. There's also something called glycation. When blood sugar is elevated, even moderately, glucose molecules can bind to proteins in the body. And that creates something called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These are sticky, inflammatory compounds that can damage tissues over time, including brain tissue. And older adults who have frequent blood sugar spikes tend to accumulate more of these compounds, which may contribute to cognitive decline over the long term. We don't fully understand the mechanism yet, but the association is there. And then there's the gut. The gut microbiome changes with age. The diversity of bacteria decreases, and that affects how we digest and absorb nutrients. It also affects inflammation. A less diverse microbiome tends to be more inflammatory, and inflammation affects the brain. It can make the blood-brain barrier more permeable, which means inflammatory molecules that normally wouldn't reach the brain can get through, and that can impair cognition. So when you eat foods that spike blood sugar and promote inflammation, like refined carbs and sugar, you're adding fuel to a fire that's already smoldering. Now, I know this sounds complicated, and in some ways it is, but the practical takeaway is actually pretty straightforward. You don't need to understand all the biochemistry. You just need to remember a few simple rules. Rule 1. Don't eat starch and sugar together without protein and fat. If you're having toast, add an egg or some nut butter. If you're having fruit, pair it with a handful of nuts or a piece of cheese. If you're having pasta, make sure there's a good amount of protein and vegetables on the plate, and maybe a drizzle of olive oil. Rule 2. Be especially careful with liquid carbs. Juice, soda, sweetened coffee drinks, even smoothies that are mostly fruit. They hit the bloodstream faster than solid food. If you're going to have them with a meal, not on an empty stomach. Or, better yet, skip them most of the time and drink water instead. Rule 3. Watch the timing. If you're someone who feels foggy in the afternoon, look at what you ate for lunch. If it was mostly carbs and sugar, that's probably your answer. And you don't have to overhaul your whole diet. Just tweak lunch. Add more protein, add some healthy fat. Cut back on the bread or the sweetened drink. See what happens. And rule 4, don't assume that healthy foods can't cause this problem. Whole grain bread is better than white bread, yes, but it's still bread. It still breaks down into glucose. Brown rice is better than white rice, but it's still rice. Fruit is better than candy, but if you eat 3 pieces of fruit in one sitting, you're still getting a lot of sugar. So it's not about good foods versus bad foods. It's about combinations and portions. Now, I want to be realistic here. These changes don't work for everyone. Some people make these adjustments and still feel foggy, and when that happens, we have to look deeper. We check medications. We look at sleep quality. We check for sleep apnea, which is very common in older adults and often undiagnosed. We check thyroid function. We look at vitamin levels, especially B12 and vitamin D. We screen for depression because depression in older adults often presents as cognitive slowing, not sadness. So food is one piece, but it's not the only piece. And even when food is part of the problem, the response isn't always immediate. Some people feel better within a few days. Others take a few weeks. And some people don't notice a difference until they go back to their old eating pattern and realize, oh, that's what was making me feel that way. So it requires a little patience and a little experimentation. But here's what I've noticed. The people who benefit most from these changes are the ones who were already eating fairly well, but just had this one blind spot. They were eating whole grains, lean protein, plenty of vegetables, but they were also having juice with breakfast, or a sweet snack in the afternoon, or bread with every meal, and once they adjusted that one thing, everything else clicked into place. The people who don't benefit as much are usually dealing with more complex issues. Maybe they're on multiple medications that affect cognition. Maybe they have untreated sleep apnea. Maybe they're dealing with chronic pain or stress or isolation, and the brain fog is part of a bigger picture. And in those cases, food helps, but it's not enough on its own. So I don't want to oversell this. I don't want you to think that changing your breakfast is going to cure dementia or reverse aging or make you feel 30 again. It won't, but it might make you feel a little clearer, a little steadier, a little more like yourself. And for a lot of people, that's worth it. Now, let's talk about what this doesn't change, because I think it's important to set realistic expectations. This approach won't prevent Alzheimer's disease. It won't stop normal age-related memory changes. It won't make you remember every name or every detail the way you did when you were younger. The brain ages. That's not something we can stop. And some degree of slowing is normal. It's not pathological. It's just life. What this approach can do for many people is reduce the extra noise, the unnecessary fog, the cognitive static that comes from blood sugar swings. And when you reduce that, you're left with your baseline, which might still include some forgetfulness, some slower processing, some moments where you walk into a room and forget why. That's okay. That's normal. But you're not adding extra confusion on top of it. And that's worth clarifying, because I think a lot of people are looking for a solution that will make them feel the way they did 20 years ago. And that's not realistic. The brain changes. The body changes. But that doesn't mean you have to feel foggy all the time. There's a difference between normal aging and unnecessary dysfunction. And a lot of what people experience as brain fog falls into that second category. It's not inevitable. It's not just age. It's fixable. So let me walk you through a practical approach, not a meal plan, not a diet, just a way of thinking about food that makes this easier. Step 1, before you change what you eat, notice how you feel. Keep a simple log for a few days. Write down what you ate and when, and then write down how you felt an hour or two later. Energized, foggy, tired, clear? You don't need to track calories or macros or anything complicated, just food and feeling, because the pattern will show up pretty quickly if it's there. Step 2, once you see the pattern, pick one meal to adjust. Usually it's breakfast or lunch. Those are the meals where people tend to eat the most carbs and sugar together. And they're the meals that are followed by the times when people need to think clearly. Mid-morning at work or mid-afternoon when you're running errands or helping family or doing something that requires focus. So let's say you usually have cereal with milk and a banana for breakfast. That's mostly carbs. The cereal is starch. The banana is sugar. The milk has a little protein, but not much. So try this instead, a smaller portion of cereal, or swap it for plain Greek yogurt. Add the banana, but also add a handful of nuts or a spoonful of nut butter. Maybe a few berries instead of a whole banana. You're still getting carbs, you're still getting sweetness, but now you've added protein and fat, and that changes the whole metabolic response. Or let's say you usually have a sandwich for lunch. White bread, deli meat, maybe some lettuce and tomato, and a bag of chips and a soda. That's a lot of refined carbs and sugar. So try this. Swap the white bread for whole grain, or better yet, use a lettuce wrap, or just eat the insides of the sandwich with a fork. Add avocado or a slice of cheese. Skip the chips, or replace them with raw veggies and hummus. And swap the soda for water or unsweetened iced tea. You're still having lunch, you're still satisfied, but the blood sugar response is completely different. And here's the key. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to do this every meal, every day. You just have to do it often enough that your brain gets a more stable supply of fuel most of the time. Because the body is resilient. It can handle an occasional spike. It's the repeated daily spikes that cause problems. Step 3. Notice what happens. Give it a week or two, and then check in with yourself. Do you feel clearer in the afternoons? Are you less irritable? Do you have more energy? If yes, keep going. If no, then either the food wasn't the issue or you need to adjust something else. Maybe the portion sizes, maybe the timing, maybe something else entirely. And if it doesn't help, that's okay. That just means we need to look at other factors. But it's worth trying because it's low risk and low cost, and for a lot of people, it works. Now, I also want to talk about the nervous system side of this, because it's not just about the mechanics of blood sugar. It's also about how your body interprets what's happening. When your blood sugar drops, even slightly, your body perceives that as a threat. It's a survival mechanism. Low blood sugar historically meant starvation, so the body releases stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, to bring the blood sugar back up. And those hormones make you feel anxious, jittery, on edge, even if there's nothing to be anxious about. And that compounds the brain fog, because now you're not just slow, you're also uneasy. And that combination makes it even harder to think clearly. So part of the solution is calming the nervous system down. And that doesn't mean meditation or deep breathing, though those can help. It means giving your body consistent, reliable fuel so it doesn't have to go into crisis mode. When your blood sugar is stable, your stress hormones stay low, your nervous system stays calm, and your brain functions better. And this is where the two-step approach comes in. First, you address the mechanical side. You adjust the food combinations so the blood sugar stays steady. And second, you give your nervous system time to recalibrate. Because if you've been riding a blood sugar roller coaster for months or years, your nervous system has been on high alert for months or years. It doesn't calm down overnight. It takes a little time, maybe a few weeks, but it does happen. And during that time, you might notice other things improving too. Your sleep might get a little better. Your mood might be more stable. You might feel less reactive to small stresses, because all of those things are connected to blood sugar regulation and nervous system tone. It's not just about the brain. It's about the whole system. Now, let's talk about what happens if you try this and it helps, but then you slip back into old habits. Because that happens. Life gets busy. You're traveling, you're at a family gathering, you're tired, and you just grab what's easy. And suddenly the fog comes back, and you think, oh no, I broke it, I ruined it. But you didn't. You just reminded your body what it doesn't like. And that's actually useful information. Because now you know that the sandwich and juice combo makes you foggy. You know that the cereal and banana without anything else makes you sluggish. And so the next time you're in that situation, you can make a different choice. Or you can accept the trade-off. You can say, okay, I'm going to have this meal and I'm probably going to feel a little foggy afterward. And that's fine, because it's just one meal and I'll get back on track tomorrow. That's not failure. That's just life. And I think that's important to say, because a lot of health advice feels very all or nothing. Either you do it perfectly or you've failed. But that's not how the body works. The body is flexible. It adapts. And as long as you're making better choices most of the time, you're going to feel better most of the time. That's all we're aiming for. So let me give you another example. I had a patient, a man in his mid-70s, retired, active. He walked every morning. He volunteered at his church. He was doing well, but he came in because he was having trouble focusing when he played bridge with his friends. He said he'd lose track of the cards, he'd forget what suit was trump, and he was embarrassed. He thought maybe it was time to stop playing, so we talked about his routine. And he told me that he usually played bridge in the early afternoon, right after lunch. And lunch was almost always the same thing. A turkey sandwich on white bread, a handful of pretzels, and a can of ginger ale. And I asked him, do you feel foggy at any other time of day? He said no, just in the afternoon. Mornings were fine. Evenings were fine. Just the afternoon. So we changed lunch. whole grain bread instead of white, added some avocado and tomato to the sandwich, swapped the pretzels for carrot sticks and hummus, swapped the ginger ale for sparkling water. And he tried it. And a week later, he told me he'd played bridge twice that week and hadn't lost focus once. He was stunned. He said, "I thought I was losing my mind." And I told him, "No, you were just losing your blood sugar." And that's the thing. These symptoms feel big, they feel scary, but sometimes the cause is small, and the fix is small. And that's actually good news. Now, I want to be careful here, because I don't want to minimize real cognitive decline. If someone is truly developing dementia, changing their diet isn't going to stop it. And I don't want people to delay getting evaluated because they think, "Oh, I'll just eat better and it'll go away." That's not what I'm saying. If you're worried about your memory, if you're noticing changes that are affecting your daily life, you should see a doctor. You should get evaluated. Because there are treatable causes of cognitive decline, and the sooner you catch them, the better. But a lot of what people experience isn't dementia. It's just fog. And fog is different. Fog is temporary. It comes and goes. It's worse at certain times of day. It's affected by sleep and stress and food, and it responds to changes. Dementia doesn't. Dementia is progressive. It's persistent. It doesn't fluctuate as much. So if you're someone who feels sharp in the morning and foggy in the afternoon, that's probably not dementia. That's probably something else. And food is a good place to start looking. All right, so let's bring this together. What are we really talking about here? We're talking about a mismatch between the way a lot of us eat and the way the aging body processes food. We eat foods that were designed to be quick and convenient. White bread, juice, crackers, sweetened yogurt, and we eat them in combinations that make sense from a taste perspective, but not from a metabolic perspective. And the result is a blood sugar pattern that the brain doesn't handle well. Spike. Crash, fog, over and over, day after day. And the fix isn't complicated. It's not a special diet. It's not expensive supplements. It's just pairing carbs with protein and fat, eating whole foods more often than processed foods, drinking water instead of sugary drinks most of the time, paying attention to how you feel, and adjusting based on that. It's simple. But simple doesn't mean easy, because it requires awareness and intention and a willingness to change habits that might have been in place for decades. But it's doable, and for a lot of people, it makes a real difference. Not a miraculous difference, not a life-changing difference, but a noticeable one. A little more clarity, a little more steadiness, a little more capacity to do the things that matter, and at this stage of life, that's what counts. So here's what I'd suggest. If any of this resonates with you, if you recognize that pattern of afternoon fog or post-meal sluggishness, try the two-step approach. First, calm the system. Make sure you're eating in a way that keeps your blood sugar stable. Protein and fat with every meal. Fewer liquid carbs, fewer refined carbs, more whole foods. And second, give it time. Don't expect immediate results. Give your body a few weeks to adjust, and then see how you feel. And if it helps, great, keep going. If it doesn't, that's okay too. That just means the fog is coming from somewhere else, and we need to look at other factors. But at least you'll know, and that's valuable. One more thing, if you found this useful, if it gave you something to think about or try, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button or subscribe to the Everyday Health Podcast. It helps more people find this kind of practical, grounded information. And if you know someone who's been struggling with brain fog or feeling mentally slower than they used to, share this with them. Sometimes, just knowing that it's not inevitable, that there might be a reason and a fix, makes all the difference. And here's a question for you. Have you noticed times of day when you feel sharper or foggier? I'd be curious to know if you've ever connected it to what you ate. Drop a comment if you feel like it. No pressure, just curious. Take care of yourself. And remember, small changes, done consistently, often add up to something meaningful.